Welcome to Waking Mad. I'm Ben Bruce, and we're on location at the Australian Afterlife Explorers Conference in Melbourne. And I have the great pleasure to introduce our guest, Mary Rodwell. Mary has written a wonderful book entitled Awakening, and she is interested in the contact and encounter experience with non-human extraterrestrial intelligence. She's also a professional hypnotherapist and counsellor, and I believe she was a nurse, or is a nurse as well. And you're also the president of the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters.
I'm ACERN. I'm a principal of ACERN and a co-founder. I am a founder of ACERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, but also a director and co-founder of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters.
Okay. So thanks for joining us and welcome.
No, you're welcome.
Would you please tell us a little bit, first of all, about how you became interested in these encounter experiences?
Well, apart from the fact that, one of the things all my life has been, if it's weird and wonderful, I've got a book on it because I'm just always interested in the mysteries. Okay. Right from a small child, I've had a curiosity. And I think, very spiritual in my own way of looking at the world and why we're here, all those big questions. But apart from that, working as a counsellor, I've worked with grief and bereavement. I've worked with people who've had a range of human experiences that often have triggered paranormal kinds of experiences as well. So someone who's lost their father or their mother may say, I sense them sometimes around, I sometimes sense they're guiding me or whatever. So I'm not a stranger, or was not a stranger to any of that anyway. But when I had a gentleman come and see me just over about 20 years ago now in Western Australia, he came to me, he said, I've heard that you're open-minded. And he said, for this, he said, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're a loony. And proceeded to tell me that he was being taken up on spacecraft. He would wake up with shaved areas on his legs. He would wake up, they'd have nosebleeds. He was aware he was being taken, and he was being, certain things were happening to him, but not just him. It was his partner and it was the children. So here was a very articulate, middle-aged man who was, if he was having his own experience, how can it affect both his partner and his children? That was very compelling. Fortunately, as I said, if it's weird and wonderful, I got a book on it. I'd read 2 books that helped me to look at this not just from one perspective. And one of them was a book by Dr. John Mack, who was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who was a skeptic but started to look into this whole phenomena. And he, after writing the book Abduction, was very clear that he believed that this was a real experience, and he did all the psychological testing to make sure that it was none of the usual ways that we would see this as a psychiatric condition. He also went on to write a book called Passport to the Cosmos, which expanded on that. So I'd read the book of Abduction by him. I'd read Dr. Whitley Strieber's book, who's a science fiction writer who had experiences with the beings called Communion. And so I'd got those that I'd read literally synchronously a few months before. Then I meet this gentleman called Ellis Taylor, who's written about 4 books himself now. He's a very good friend of mine. And he was the one that came in my room and said, look, nobody believes us. They just think you're a loony. The relatives won't come to the house because they think it's demons. And my partner's terrified. Can you help? And so that was the beginning of my rabbit hole. And from then I've worked with over 3,000 individuals globally, families, the broad range of professions, from scientists right through to lawyers, to policemen, to housewives, to pilots, children that have all talked about these patterns of encounters, a broad range from really terrifying to the most loving and most benevolent side of looking at this experience. So I've had both extremes, if you like, and many that have taken it quite for granted that this is part of their lives, even if everyone else thinks they're around the bend.
And next thing you know, you've set up the Australian Close Encounters Research Network and co-founded the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters.
Well, the CERN was my first one because I saw in America they'd actually done this, and Dr. John Mack, the psychiatrist, had set up his own centre for extraordinary experience. So I saw he was doing that, and there was another group of professionals that had set something up. And I thought, well, Australia needs it, because there was nothing in Australia apart from UFO groups. And not everyone who goes to a UFO group, they don't necessarily have the skills. They might be able to look at the evidence, the photographic evidence of craft or ground traces and this kind of thing, but they don't have professional therapists or people that can help a person through the process of the whole experience of, oh my God, I've seen something I shouldn't see, that doesn't belong in my reality. What do I do about that? How do I process this? And if I have missing time, where do I go? Who's going to help me find out what happened in that? Certainly many of the traditional psychologists and psychiatrists, there's only one way they're going to look at that, and that is, most of the time, there's something seriously wrong with you.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's that horrible, almost like pathological skepticism.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the evidence.
They're absolutely terrified
of... You're mad.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So you've obviously come across probably more people who've experienced these encounter experiences than anyone else, really.
Well, there's a few older therapists that have done a lot of similar work to me. There's Barbara Lamb in America. She's in her 80s now, and she's still worked with many hundreds like myself. But no one there's only a very few that have worked with the numbers I have, and because of being the only one in Australia that's worked those kinds of numbers, I get access from all over the world, including countries that don't even speak English, but they've seen my presentations and they will write to me, whether it's from Turkey, Uruguay, Alaska, Scandinavia or whatever. So it's not even non-English speaking will write to me and say, I've got nowhere to go in my country, will you help me? And even with their poor English will tell me about their experiences and what have you. So this is absolutely global, and what's fascinating to me is whole families are involved, because this is an intergenerational experience, so that if there's one person in the family that's had it, you can be pretty certain that even if the siblings don't own it or the parents don't own it, they can trace it back maybe to grandmother or grandfather or whatever, and you can actually see the intergenerational links.
Now, that's fascinating. I've never considered the intergenerational link. So many implications would come from that. I was just wondering for yourself, I know you've come across the encounters through your therapy, or being a therapist, I should say. Have you had an encounter yourself at all?
Not in this kind of way. I mean, I have tapped into energies around me, this kind of thing, but I would not consider myself that kind of an experiencer, where they actually have gone up on the craft. So I would say not on a conscious level, although I will admit this, that some people that I've met that have been on the craft and have memory have said that someone that looks very much like me has been up there. So perhaps I have, but I have no conscious memory. So I can't say that I have conscious memory like most of my clients that come. But look, I think there's a lot of people that don't have conscious memory that have been up on craft and probably don't realise they have until they actually see maybe as a strange light in the sky, or they start to realise that they're different in some way. So, having conscious memory doesn't say everything.
Okay, fair enough. So these extraterrestrial beings, in other words, beings not from this planet or on this planet, it seems, this might sound like a very basic question, but to get the ball rolling, where are they from?
Well, there are extraterrestrial ones, which obviously come from other planetary systems, and we're talking about more than just our own galaxy here. Well, I've had a 10-year-old tell his parents that he came from a portal through the sun, that the sun is a portal, and that there are other universes, etc., as well. So there are extraterrestrials, but there are also interdimensional beings as well. There's a whole range of interdimensionals, extradimensionals, and probably, I believe from my research, that we may even have travellers from our future coming back in time, because time and space is not the same in the way that we understand, or this is what they teach or they share with those that have experiences, that we see time in a linear fashion, when in fact it's not like that at all, that we don't understand actually what time is. So yes, time travellers as well, and probably others that I haven't mentioned, but to give you an overall, that is what contact can be, all of those, not just extraterrestrial.
So it may be the case that with these intelligences, in terms of contacting us, the normal physics that applies to the human body doesn't apply to them.
No, No. And they can come in and out of our dimension if they so choose. Not all need spacecraft. They can come through their own portals, because we can become portals too. And
I suppose it begs the question: what is a portal?
Well, it's how we interact with the matrix or the holographic universe. I mean, we've already discovered through some scientists that worked in Russia that DNA actually has that ability, that it actually creates miniature wormholes, and that's how we get intuition and how we get telepathic information is actually by our DNA as miniature wormholes going into the matrix or into the holographic quantum reality, and we pull in through intent information and we get it through, and that's how telepathy works and how many of these other things manifest that we experience. But we're still looking at the 3D world and not realizing that we're actually operating in a multidimensional world.
Which is, I gather, why, Mary, these experiences, these encounters are so bizarre and shocking and upsetting, because we're having a 3D regular mixed spacesuit encounter with this very complex state of affairs.
And the problem is that modern science is still not acknowledging our multidimensional aspects of ourselves. We're taught that to believe that unless we can touch, feel, feel it, smell it, or hear it, that anything else isn't real. And yet all of us have multidimensional experiences. We have intuition, we have feelings, we have knowings, we get insights. And many of our geniuses would talk about that and how they would get insights by just going into a meditative state and knowing full well it wasn't coming from their mind or their consciousness, or at least their thinking brain, that they would get these insights that would just suddenly manifest in their consciousness, and they would end up with these amazing understandings of and Einstein and many others, including Leonardo da Vinci, said that they would just go into this space and that this information would be available to them.
So really what I'm hearing is these extraterrestrial encounters say more about the nature of consciousness itself, as well as the universe.
Absolutely.
It asks so many questions about it, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and this is why it's so hard to prove it in the way that we can. That you get this whole thing of bring something from the craft or whatever. They don't realise that there's two ways you can go up on the craft. One is physically, or you can go up and be learning in an out of body state where you're not going to be bringing anything back if you're out of body, but you can be learning on the craft in an out of body state. But you can go up on the craft and what have you, where your consciousness is heightened as well, and learning things from a whole new level. This isn't something you can prove in 3D terms, other than you are changed by the experience. And with fantasy or hallucinations, you're not changed. But this is a transformative experience, and this is the evidence of its reality: is that people are no longer the same as they used to be. Their whole perception is changed, the way that they look at life, the way that they want to live, and what they manifest, from healing abilities to these strange scripts. Coming out with these strange languages are all evidence of a reality, even if the only thing they're showing you is 3 strange dots that they wake up with, or they're seeing, or they feel they've got something in their body that's been implanted or whatever, which is perhaps the only other way that's an evidence of that, apart from the fact that they are no longer the same.
Yeah. So people who've experienced encounters with ET phenomena or intelligences, they are profoundly different after the event.
Absolutely.
And there is also objective evidence as well. I believe there's some research around actual implants that have been found.
Oh yes, Dr. Roger Lear, who was a good friend of mine, actually took out up to 15 before he died. And they were anomalies that you couldn't, your body normally, from my nursing and training, is that, your body would normally reject anything anomalous. But they are actually... because you find with those with experiences can sometimes have scoop marks. They'll wake up with scoop marks, and these, we believe, are actually put around the implant to stop it from being rejected by the body. And they have strange compositions and what have you, which are not rejected.
Are these objects metallic?
Some are metallic, some of them are silicon, some of them are biological, and there's a lot of evidence that Dr. Lear, from taking them out and having them analysed in a double blind and what have you, and he wrote the book The Aliens and the Scalpel, and there's all the evidence, the clinical evidence, and what they found with these anomalies, which was brilliant, because up to that point nobody had ever taken it seriously. Seen on X-ray, there've been people that have sneezed out an implant in their nose and wondered what the hell it was doing there. And often they have sinus problems because of it and what have you. So there is that kind of evidence, as well as ground traces if a craft has landed, for example, and people have found themselves outside with all the doors locked. They've woken up in their beds with all the pajamas inside out or in a strange place. All these kinds of anomalies go with it, but they're not so easy for other people to believe, because unless you see this time and time again, as I've done, you say, oh, well, that was just this. And it's very easy to dismiss stuff, isn't it? You know, because you don't want to look at it or what it might mean.
Oh, you can always say something is not true. The burden of proof is always on the person who is making a claim.
Yeah.
And of course,
Exactly.
for some skeptics, they will never be satisfied.
You
You could have an
right.
alien craft, I should imagine,
Yep.
land right here, and they
Yep.
say something like a collective delusion. You just can't win.
I've always said that there's 10% of this planet that if a UFO landed on their front lawn, they would say it was a fire engine. Because there is no way they are going to ever admit that that's anything other than
Actually,
fire
I think you're totally right. I'm actually literally at a perceptual level.
Yeah.
If your brain cannot possibly accept something,
That's right.
it can often just block it out.
And
I mean, that
that's
happens with trauma.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And there are many people that see UFOs that afterwards never talk about it because they say, don't want to think about it. Don't want to think about it because it's too scary.
Sure.
And so they just block it out.
You know, the local yokels will
Yeah.
have a go at you
Absolutely.
at least. And,
Exactly.
you know, going back
Because
to
what
the
you're setting
persecutions
up
that we've had.
for being laughed at, and this is why so many with experiences never talk about it. Because what's the point? Because you're just going to have people that will go, oh yeah, right. What were you on? How many beers did you have, or whatever? And it just becomes sickening.
Yeah.
If this is profound in your life, and people are making fun of you, and so you shut up, and people lead double lives.
And you're
with
obviously
this.
very passionate about this.
I'm passionate because I'm a therapist,
Yeah.
and for me,
in terms of validating these people's experiences.
Absolutely, so many end up, in hospital or medicated. I've met those that have gone into hospital because they've told the doctor that they're seeing aliens, and I've got in a chapter of my book a 14-year-old girl. I think I call her Kathy. Came to me when she was about 19, but she told me when she was 14, she told the doctor that she was seeing aliens. Immediately he diagnosed her as schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
She was put on a cocktail of medications. 3 times she tried to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And it
I was just
wasn't
thinking
until
how
later.
many of these people actually commit suicide.
Look, well they do. A lot of them do because they don't know how to handle it, or they end up so medicated and in hospital because nobody believes them, and I'm not blaming the psychiatrists. I'm not blaming them necessarily because
No, it's their paradigm.
That's their paradigm.
Yeah,
Seeing aliens, yeah, right, okay, here's some good medication. It's not, I'm not blaming them.
I often find this, like, I hear people say, oh, I went to the psychiatrist, or I took my daughter to the psychiatrist, and we walked out with 5 drugs.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, well, that's what psychiatrists do. What did you
They
expect?
are drug. Yeah,
Why did you go if you
drug
didn't want
pushers,
medication?
Exactly.
It's that
It's a
biomedical
medical
paradigm,
model.
isn't it?
It's a medical model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even with psychologists, anything aberrant that they see as an aberration of any kind,
disorder.
like, then it's got to be, trauma in your childhood, or we all know it because I've been in this field for a lot of years, and I know exactly.
And it's rather a leap. It's founded by so many assumptions.
It's absolutely. Absolutely. So
And sometimes just to listen to someone's story, just at least humour them. Just listen to them and hear what they have to say. You might be rather impressed by what they have to say. Just a few other questions before we finish the interview. Why do you think these extraterrestrial intelligences are interested in interacting with us? They seem to be committing a rather concerted effort collectively and by so many different sorts of planets, basically, or star systems. Why do you think they're interested in human beings?
Well, simply put, in a few words, is because we're part of them. We are hybrids, and we have anomalies in our DNA that are part of them, and this is what they do. They go into planetary systems and they seed them, and they put parts of themselves in them, and we are being, if you like, assisted to evolve with their help. So they come in and gradually help us to evolve to the point where we can become part of the galactic community.
So in a sense, they're doing a service.
They are, even though it can be traumatic and difficult at the time, because of the fact that we are part of them. And we are all hybrids, and the DNA evidence is there to show that. We've got 223 genes in our DNA that are a sideways insertion of genetic material that are all to do with higher psychological functioning. There is no other species on this planet that has them. And I know that because someone worked with Dr. Francis Crick, the co-founder of the DNA molecule, and he said, Mary, there's no other species. And even Dr. Francis Crick said that the seeds of life came in a spacecraft. We are intelligently designed. Crick said that.
When we're taught Crick and Watson's model of DNA, mainstream, obviously, DNA is really the essence of biology.
Yes.
And Crick actually made that comment.
Absolutely. He wrote in Life Itself, the book Life Itself, that the seeds of life came in a spacecraft.
Well, what do you say?
Okay.
If Crick's going to say it.
So there you go.
Then that's the way it is. So I suppose just to wrap this up even further, how do we best discriminate a genuine case of close encounter with someone who's just making it up for whatever reason? What's the best way that you must come across all kinds of characters, there's publicity stunts and all that sort of thing. What's a good way to sort the wheat from the chaff, so to speak?
Well, there's not really that many actually that do that. And that might surprise a lot of people, because you know what? This isn't something you really want to talk about. This isn't something you want to advertise, because most people are just going to think you are a loony.
So that's a good question, is why would people want to do that?
Why would people travel to see me?
Yeah. All that effort.
As far as America, New Zealand, from all parts of Australia, spending a lot of money to come and tell me a porcupine. Why would you do it? I'm not going to make you famous. I'm not going to stick you on any book cover or whatever. So why would you do it, other than the fact, I believe you. So what? So what? What is it going to achieve? So there's no purpose to it. It doesn't achieve any. I'm not going to give them lots of money because they tell me they're an experiencer or not. And once they start talking, I could tell within the first 5 minutes of whether or not they're coming from a genuine perspective, because there are all things about this that most people don't know.
I know that in my work as a psychologist, I do come across fantasists from time to time.
Yeah, and you get the sense of them very fast.
Well, actually, you know what? Over time and being more experienced now, having worked in the field for 13 years or so, you do spot them pretty quickly. Yeah. And I find there are certain key markers to do with incoherence.
And
the story's not cogent. There's contradictions.
Right. That's exactly
your basic police detective would tell you this stuff, wouldn't he?
You see, are they operating in a 3D world reasonably well or not? And you can soon get the message when.
Are they functional?
Those are all the things, and and because I've worked with hundreds and hundreds, you get a sense of someone very, very quickly whether or not they've lost the plot, or whether or not they're in some kind of fantasy world.
I mean, we have with certain kinds of dementia and schizophrenia, for example, and I'm not saying schizophrenia is actually understood, because I know it's not understood. Yeah. But you get this sort of formal thought disorder, thought derailment.
That's right.
And they're all over the place with intrusive thinking, and there's no theme or sense to it. But if someone's talking with you in a logical manner, a reasonable manner, well, I gather that's the hallmark, isn't it? Well,
and also the detail and the way that they'll say, I know I sound like I'm crazy, but this is how it is with me. And they may have marks on their body. They may describe all these other physical sides to it as well. And because often as not, they've been having experiences all their lives, there'll be other indicators that I will throw out, and I will see their response to that. And that will be more of the indicators. But you can soon tell when somebody is coming from that integrity of, this is absolutely crazy, I know on one level, but this is what I'm finding. This is how it is. And that in itself, by the way they respond to you and by other little clues, you just get to know. But primarily, there are lots of things that they won't know if it's real. And I can ask those questions and that will soon tell me. But most times, they've only come to see me for one reason. They want to understand. They want to make sense of it. They're not after fame or fortune. All they want is for someone to help them understand, is this real or is this not real? And if it's not real, please tell me and I'll go and see someone and get it sorted out, because I don't want to live like this anymore. That is the general kind of response that you will get from most people.
Now, in a moment, we'll be talking with an affiliate, an associate of yours, a young lady named Leah?
Lee, I came across a few years ago. Her mother is a scientist who wrote to me because her daughter was talking about things that really confronted her. Because as a scientist, it conflicted with so much she'd been taught about the nature of reality. And what's so very compelling with Lee is that these experiences are what I'm finding with the new generations that I call the new human are really upgrades of awareness.
So we're about to be introduced to a young woman,
yes,
who is an upgrade per se.
What I call an upgrade whose interactions are completely different to the old style contact.
And you mean an upgrade as a human being species?
Yes, because they are more at peace with our multidimensional reality. They are the ones, we're still very heavily programmed into our 3D world and struggle with our multidimensional nature and acceptance of it, where the new children coming in and someone like Lee, this has been her reality since she ever remembers.
I believe there's called Star Children or
yes,
Indigo
Star Children, Indigos, Crystal, Children of Light, Rainbow Children. There's a whole range of names that are given to them. And I will add to this, what we see as dysfunctions are actually I believe, new programs such as Asperger's, some forms of autism, dyslexia, ADHD.
So these aren't just pathologies?
No, I've come to understand that these are new programs, and the reason they are like that and seem like it's a pathology is only because they don't operate in the limited 3D world, because as we see reality like this, they're seeing reality like this, and so they don't function so well because they are trying to manage to be in this when in fact this is what they're experiencing, and that is why they seem dysfunctional. But it's because we don't understand what they're experiencing and their sensory overload. And this is what I'm writing about in my new book.
And the new book is called?
The New Human.
The New Human?
Yes.
And I believe you have a terminology to describe this new humanity?
Homo-Noeticus. And this is, they're coming in, and Lee has also agreed that a lot of the new ones are coming in from 2000, but they have been coming in and upgraded for many, many years. I'm sort of we're the older models, people like you and probably more me, I'm one of the older models, but actually each generation is an upgrade with more awareness.
And do you mean on a DNA level?
On a DNA level, they've just got more switched on, if you like.
Because much of our genetic code is actually switched off.
Yes,
like the genes which code the gills, tails, wings.
90 to 95%. We only operate with 7%. Yeah. They call the rest junk DNA. Well, actually, it's not.
It's rather disrespectful.
It's more than just disrespectful. But a lot of that now is being, if you like, switched on. Okay. And as it gets switched on,
and it will be the constellation of switching it on. There'll be so much infinite complexity, wouldn't there?
Absolutely.
Not just do you switch more on, but what's the constellation of what's switched on, and how do these different genes switch on, so to speak, interact?
Yes.
The overall multifactorial model.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Mary Rodwell, thank you so much for coming and Waking Mad. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And thank you very much for watching Waking Mad. And please, if you've enjoyed this podcast, share, like, and subscribe to our channel. And I'll see you next time very shortly. Actually, we'll be talking to Lee. Thank you very much.